I want to tell you about the one motel room with no mirrors. Years ago, I was working as a young journalist in a big city, and one day I got a call from a local motel. They wanted me to come write a story about their new policy. I said sure. I went over there and I talked to the manager. He explained to me that they used to be a pretty typical motel. They had a restaurant, they had a pool, they had a bar, but they were losing money, so they decided to get rid of all the mirrors in the motel. That way, no one would be able to look in the mirrors. They'd be able to check in, but no one would ever be able to check out. Because once you looked in the mirror and saw what was behind you, you'd never want to leave. I thought it was a great story. I wrote it up and I turned it into the editor, and then I never heard anything about it. I didn't think it was a big deal. But the next day I opened up the newspaper and on the front page, above the fold, was my story. And the headline read, "Local motel lures guests with check-in, no check-out policy." Below that, a picture of me standing in front of the motel with a big neon sign that said, "Vacancy." And below that, the story. The whole front page was devoted to this motel that had no mirrors. A few days later, I got a call from the editor. He chewed me out. He said, "What were you thinking? You jeopardized the entire paper by running such a reckless, irresponsible story. You could have just made up some fake story about a dog or something." And I said, "I didn't make it up. There is a motel with no mirrors." And he said, "No one wants to hear about a motel with no mirrors." Then he hung up on me. So I was determined to prove him wrong. I called all the motels in town and I asked them if they had mirrors. And they all said yes. So then I drove around town looking for a motel with no mirrors. And finally I found it. It was the Starlight Motel, and it was off the beaten path. There was no sign out front, but I knew it was the right place because in the parking lot, all the cars were going in reverse. I walked into the lobby, and it was like a scene from the Twilight Zone. All these people were sitting around, and no one was speaking. They were all staring straight ahead. And then I looked behind me, and I realized that no one had a face. They were all featureless, and then I knew I was in trouble. When I turned to run, I noticed something. All the doors in the motel were marked "Do not enter," but one door was I figured that if I could get through that door, I could escape. So I ran to it and I opened it and I stepped through. And on the other side of the door was a big, clear mirror. And in the mirror I saw the face of the manager of the motel. And he was smiling at me. And then he started to come toward me. And I started to scream. Now, you might be wondering why I never got out of that motel room. Well, let me tell you, no one ever gets out of that motel room. Because the one motel room with no mirrors doesn't exist. It's just a story people tell to warn others not to stop there. Because once you stop at the one motel with no mirrors, you can never leave. And if you look in the mirror, you'll see what's behind you and you'll never want to leave.